Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Sustainable Commodities podcast, a podcast to help people navigate the ever-changing world of sustainability and sustainable commodities. I'm Barnaby Patchett, MD of 199 Agency, a comms agency working in sustainability, and with me
is Judith Murdoch from Murdoch Associates, specialising in forest risk commodities.
And today on the podcast, we're joined by Thijs Pasmans, a sustainability consultant who focuses on tropical commodities like palm oil and cocoa. We're going to be talking with Thijs about a number of topics, palm oil, biodiversity, smallholders, and in particular some of his recent reports and fieldwork out in Indonesia.
So, welcome, Thijs. I was trying to think of how long I've actually known you. Certainly we're becoming the old timers in the industry, but to start off with, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and actually the work that you do.
Hi, good morning, Judith. Morning, Barnaby. Yes, well, I think it must have been somewhere in 2014, 15, Judith.
Yeah.
I met one of the RTs or IPOA conferences back then. Then I was still with MVO, the Dutch oils and fats industry. My intro to the world of oils and fats. I did that for about 6-7 years. And then in 2019, we moved house and that was too far away from the office. So still pre-COVID time. So you had to be in the office almost every day. But then I started helping some people out. And then now 6 years on, I have my own sustainability consultancy on palm oil, some other commodities like cocoa, but also rubber, a bit on coffee. So basically the same world, but then from different perspectives. What I do is actually three things. You could summarize my work. It's about facilitating dialogues, conferences, webinars. That's especially for a group of governments that I work for, the Amsterdam Declaration Partnership, ADP. So basically I make sure that the governments can talk to one another and to other stakeholders. Second is more about guiding and supporting. Like I do help a palm oil company with RSPO certification. So that's more getting their struggles and position from the field onto the paper. And then the final one, which I also like very much, is you could call it communication, but it's actually about building a bridge again between the field and theory. I like to really dig into scientific articles, reports, and then get the main messages out and then translate it to a very attractive and easy messaging, including visuals like pictures and infographics. I think the ICN guide that I published together with ICN NL colleagues earlier this year, that's a good example of that.
We'll put that in the show notes. Boosting Biodiversity, a visual guide to promote biodiversity values in oil palm landscapes. I agree on the necessity of moving kind of research into more accessible formats. Very few people outside of academics are going to spend the time to read 40, 50-page reports, but they might very well look at some nice infographics and get out those key things and the important stuff from it. It's something that I think academia has done very poorly up until now. So it's I think it's a really valuable thing.
Yeah, and I know we're going to perhaps start with touching on SPOD, which is where we all recently met up. And then definitely want to explore some of your field experience, because some of what you have been talking about with us has been great. But maybe just to start off with SPOD, what were your key takeaways of the event in Paris?
Sorry, so SPOD, the Sustainable Palm Oil Dialogue, for those who don't know.
Thank you.
Yes, that was it almost 2 months ago. Oh, so what I remember now, that must have been the key highlights of the event. Well, for sure, I mean, it was presented, and the agenda was very social topic, right? So on labor and land and all these issues, which tend to have been neglected if you look at the RSPO history. But then what amazed me was that in the end, we still ended up talking about forest and deforestation. So I think that shows it's impossible to de-link these topics. So that's maybe a first highlight. And then the second one is a bit more very specific, but the RSPO credit system. So, the instead of focusing on fully traceable supply chains back to the source and keeping that segregated from the farm to fork. So to say there, I still could taste for the first time in many years a bit of acceptance or value realization of that system, that realizing, yes, if you really want to reach those farmers, sometimes we still have to skip the supply chain and bring in direct incentives and rewards for them. Because, for a farmer, he's first of all, he's not familiar, but also I don't think he cares in the first place where his product ends up. If you want them to change practice, giving the reward to them directly, that I think that's still a good strategy that has shown itself. So I could taste a bit of a acceptance, like a revival of credits, you could call it, in the discussions, not really on the stage, but in the group discussions, the breakouts.
It's really interesting to see the kind of full circle on that. That's kind of where things started. And now actually for all of the big companies wanted for such a long time, the full transparency, the full traceability, want to know that smallholder stuff has come to my supply chain. And as you just mentioned, the farmer doesn't care, and neither does the forest, really. Where the palm oil ends up, it's not, from a sustainability perspective, it has very little impact either, where as long as the deforestation isn't happening, it doesn't matter. And how to kind of reduce that is the important thing. And in terms of the rewarding smallholders, the credits have faced a lot of challenges in terms of their reputation, I think, which has impacted on the price and therefore the value.
Yeah, we do have to make a distinction between these are specific small, independent smallholder credits. Mm-hmm. So for the farmers not related, or at least for that plot of land not related to a company. So that's a difference. And I still believe traceability, more transparency has a role to play, but it's a tool and not the end goal. And I think sometimes people they mix up these two issues.
I know you visited, a variety of countries recently, and obviously, the biodiversity report was great because it just showed so much knowledge. Do you want to just talk a little bit about your recent trips and definitely around smallholders and your experience with smallholders and thinking about EUDR? What does a smallholder think about EUDR to start off with?
Well, those that I met, they didn't even know about EUDR, let alone RSPO or other even mandatory legislation. So that's that gives you a bit of idea of especially Indonesia, the scale and the distances. It's such a huge country. I mean, you fly over there to KL, it's 12 hours from Amsterdam, and they hop on a flight to Medan or Pekanbaru or Jambi, like just across the Strait of Malacca. 2 hours, well, the 1 hour flight, and then you take a car, depending on you need to go 9, 10, 11 hours. It's just one road, and then you hop on a little ferry, and then it's again on a dirt road. So it depends if it has been raining, yes or not. It might take you 1, 2, or 3 hours. And then you're in the middle of a all palm booming landscape, micro landscape with smallholders having half a hectare up to some people saying, when you ask them how many hectares do you have? Yes, I've got 100 hectares in total, and then 20 over there, and then another 25 over there. And you see these collection points. That's called like a ramp. So where they get the supply chain, all as the farmer, he sells it to a middleman, to another middleman. Mm-hmm. And they have these collection points where these FFB, so these big trunches, 20, 30 kg, get collected and then sorted based on size, based on quality. And so these trucks come in, or motorbikes. Well, I was there maybe spending half an hour, and you see 4, 5, 6, 7 of these people coming in they go to the weigh bridge. So they weigh their stuff, they deliver, and then back on the weigh bridge to measure again. And then sometimes they pay them by cash, but also it surprised me. There's sometimes they have this electronic, just like we have here as well. electronic payment systems. So it's a very dynamic atmosphere, especially given the fact that you come from such a long way. So there's also this paradox, and it's very isolated, but also very active, and that's very it's very energized. It gives me a lot of energy because you really explore the supply chain. You're in the middle, on the top of the supply chain, seeing how things go.
Mm-hmm.
And the smallholders, I mean, I'm really intrigued as well by this idea of that we have an image that obviously smallholders are potentially in poverty and they're doing all of this to send their kids to school and to get healthcare. And for sure, there are smallholders like that. But then you get these like not wealthy, but you get it's running a business and they're doing really well out of it. I mean, what is the range of smallholders that you saw, say, in somewhere like Indonesia?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think at least already in Indonesia you've got 2.5 million. Nobody really knows the exact number of smallholders, and I met about 30 of them. But I think the debate, especially here, like the global debate or the debate on farmers, all palm farmers in Europe, I found it a bit too simplistic. Very like a popular debate on is the smallholder that needs support, and yes, that farmer will be there. But where I was in Sumatra, so Riau, Jambi, Bengkulu area, it surprised me that a lot of farmers they don't work on the farm themselves. I think I met one person. He was in his 40s. He did the harvesting and the maintenance, like upkeep, fertilizer application. He did it himself. First of all, you need to be physically strong. These bunches are 25 kg, so it's quite heavy. I don't know if you tried yourself, but
I tried and failed to harvest one on my field trip. I'm sure there's actually video evidence that the RSPO has, but yeah, hope it never sees the light of day, to be honest.
I think that's one of the things that everybody tries to do, and you think, oh, this should be easy. It is not. Yeah. I've fallen in the same trap.
And I think about some of the they do the barefoot. They pick them from the pickup back on them. So anyway, I was surprised. So you have these teams of harvesting people. They go about. They can do up to 3-4 hectares a day, and their job is to harvest. They always do that in pairs of 2, at least the ones I spoke to. So that was a shift of mindset. Oh, the farmer is not necessarily doing all the work. I think it also depends a bit on the age of the farmers, because I met the farmers, like landowners that I met, they were 50s, 60s. I mean, imagine if you came from Java in the 80s or the 90s as a transmigrant, or then all palm arrived in your area, then I think they struggled back in those days. But now, that's already 30 years ago. So, yes. And then another thing, so I had this, for 4 days, I had a car and a driver who drove me all the way down south. And so at the beginning, I thought let's just ask him, do you also have a plantation? And I didn't expect him to, because he's a taxi driver, I assumed. But then he says, yes, I've got 4 hectares over there and 5 hectares over there. And another district, his home district. Although he lived in Pekanbaru in the big city, but then I think the district was about 2-3 hours up north. Oh, wait a minute. It's good I ask you now, because then I spent the entire ride talking all this farming, like how do you do this? What's about your land titles and then your replanting and your fertilizer, how much, and where do you sell to, and things like that. So that was very interesting. But then all the other people I met, you meet people in the airplane, in the airport, or in Jakarta, and then you just ask, do you have a plantation? And often they reply like, yes, I do, or my brother has land in Kalimantan, or so that again gave a whole new dimension of this term smallholder, which I think we need to redefine and also categorize. Actually, I got this paper. I forgot the reference. Maybe you can put it in the.
Yeah, I'll put it in.
Link as well. There's a scientific paper in 2017 that has like these 6 or 7 criteria and how they split farmers based on legal status, size, origin, soil type. If you're on peat or on mineral. because every different farmers need different support or regulation enforcement, maybe.
Because I think the picture you're painting is of essentially small business owners. In a lot of cases, we're not talking sort of as you mentioned, that kind of picture that potentially consumers in Europe would have of an impoverished smallholder struggling.
Yeah, so my message would be that's not necessarily always the case. So I'm always a bit nuanced, and that's just who I am. It's never a black and white story, but so this shift towards more land owning and then hiring in people to work, and then it's interesting. What does that mean for rural development, rural society, economy? So, because in the end, the landowner, he will decide what to do with his or her land, but then it's his labor, they will actually do the job. So if you think about like use of agrochemicals, maybe the owner will, okay, let's go for RSPO, let's go without herbicides or only like according to best management practices. But then the person on the field, he might think, oh, yeah, I really want to show my boss that I'm doing a good job, so let's just make everything clean. This keeping clean and use of chemicals is very more a social, how you call this, like you really want to do it, you want to show you did a good job, and then just make everything clean, then at least I can tell them I really worked to put in my best. But then
but the cost of that from a in terms of from a biodiversity perspective, perhaps that's a good time to shift over to the biodiversity on palm.
Yes, biodiversity. I'm a biologist by training, so that's maybe what drives me also in my work, is to not just protecting rainforest, but also see how can we combine like agriculture with nature. And I think they are not separate. Well, first of all, because you need your ecological functions like your soil and your water, climate, pollination. You need that for your agricultural plants to grow and be healthy and productive as well. So we published this Boosting Biodiversity, a visual guide earlier this year, I think in February. But that started with my colleague at the IUCN Netherlands, Helene van Homberg. So we think 1.5 years ago, we talked about, and we came up, so there's already 30 million hectares of oil palm almost globally around. Mm-hmm. Yes, we should stop deforestation, but what do we do with the plantation that's already there? Very pragmatic approach. I like to be pragmatic because you have to start somewhere. And actually, when you read into it, an oil palm is a crop they stand for about 25, 30 years. So that's a long time. So it's got the possibility that some kind of biodiversity can develop throughout that time. I mean, if you walk through a plantation, especially when it's a bit more mature, you see, there's a kingfisher, there's a butterfly, frogs, other amphibians, spiders, isopods, insects. What I always like about the plantation, the epiphytes, the plants that grow on the trunk of the palm.
Yeah.
If they keep them, because sometimes they remove them for they like it clean, which is not necessarily needed. Only maybe a bit if they're in the way with harvesting, then you cannot spot the bunches. But those are really like microclimates that occur naturally, because the palm is quite a robust plant. I mean, it can tolerate quite some other undergrowth weeds, as long as they are not competing when it's dry. For example, they could compete for rainfall. Anyway, now I'm getting into my agronomic background. First of all, a plantation, it's not the forest. Let's make that clear. And we need to stop deforestation of the forest that's still there. But on a landscape level, especially in these mixed landscapes where you have patches of forest still around, populations of wildlife living in those fragmented areas. But the plantation can be a landscape that can connect these populations. So also when you talk to harvesters or persons working in the field, if you ask them, did you see any animals? So yes, we see like deer or monkeys or birds, especially. Sometimes they even see a sun bear. or Malay bear. It's called in English. I'm not sure. Anyway, in Latin America, this could be like anteaters or howler monkeys. In Africa, other species. So the animals, they do not live in plantations, but they make use of plantations. So I think if we rethink how animals make use of landscapes and how they learn to adapt to live in those landscapes, you can see the plantation from a whole new perspective. I think one of the very attractive or good example is orangutans in Sabah, in eastern Sabah, in Kinabatangan. There's groups working on corridors, local NGO Hutan, Mark Ankeras, he gave input to the guide as well. And so if you've got the female orangutans, they live in their isolated forest areas because they tend to remain where they were born. That's where they will stay for the rest of their lives. But they're fragmented. So that means in the end, if they don't find a male, the population will die out on the long term. Mm-hmm. But these males, if you allow them to move through the plantation, which they can do up to 10 kilometers, can you imagine? Orangutan from the forest, they climb trees, they even nest in all palms. And then they can visit these males, and the males can visit the females, and you keep the population alive. That's I think it's a very, very strong story because it's the orangutan, which people never associate with palm oil, only in a very negative way. But you need, just being pragmatic, you need oil palm companies to join that journey to keep the population viable in the future. But if not, they will extinct because they do not meet each other. They do not reproduce. So that's, I think we should, in the industry, and all of us should use these positive examples more to also change the image of palm oil, which is very bad, although I'm not sure if we will succeed with that. But anyway, it's possible. That's the main message. Create awareness on biodiversity is possible.
And what are some of the findings? What are some of the kind of practical steps then that a plantation could enact to make it more accessible, more useful, more friendly to biodiversity, to increased biodiversity?
Yes. Yeah, so one theme is facilitating this animal movement, which you can. Mm-hmm. There are things that you should do and some things that you should not do. Because first of all, just like this change of mindset that animals can make use of plantations.
Yeah.
But of course, also introducing even a single tree will already help a orangutan to nest and to rest on. So keeping these big trees over there, replanting some native vegetation. Of course, you got the ecological corridors, especially along rivers. But that does require also a good understanding of how these animals make use of the landscape. You cannot just take a map and say, well, we want them to cross over here. But it doesn't work like that. You really have to understand how animals behave in that landscape. Orangutans, they tend to focus on more higher points so they can navigate or follow rivers. Elephants got their migration routes. Actually, also one of the findings is you can involve your staff, your workers in the plantations who are there on a daily basis, so they see and they hear things. There's some very interesting trials or pilots with companies in West Kalimantan that use citizen science-based approaches. So getting a lot of data, which you can then model into how these animals make use of the landscape, which can then inform you like, okay, they're crossing the road over here, so maybe we should put on some speed bumps, maybe do a rope bridge, things like that. So that's a big biodiversity to the iconic animals.
Yeah.
But I think we always forget the hidden biodiversity living in the production matrix. And one of the key actions there is less or reduced or more targeted use of agrochemicals. Again, what we said in the beginning, I saw plantations like clean, like gray dirt all over the place, which it's not necessary, not even good for the palm because you've got your soil erosion, less water retention, no pollination. So that's already a very quick win, allowing the undergrowth and stimulate that by keeping it there. And maybe my favorite one is the kingfisher. If you've been around in the industry, and especially if you've visited one of the plantations in Malaysia or Indonesia, they will always talk about the barn owl.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
they put up these nest boxes, which is great because they hunt rodents like mice and rats. But they only do that during the night. But they're also like native birds of prey, and also kingfisher. And what's good about these kingfishers? So they prey on mice, but they prey on the juvenile. So before the mice reach the stage of reproduction, and they hunt during the day. So it's very complementary to each other. And you can easily attract them by introducing a perches so they can roost on or just sit on and look out if they see something moving. Because the plantation, it's not like, the palm is not a tree, right? So it doesn't have branches where birds can naturally sit on. And they need some elevation to spot. It was a paper of Malaysian University actually that found that out. I found it because of its simplicity, it's just great, right? And it's kingfisher. I like the blue shiny wings they have.
And it's interesting because kingfishers in, say, the UK are around water. They would be, actually, so it's interesting. Fishing. Yeah, fishing.
Yeah. You will find them more naturally closer to water.
Yeah.
At least to a certain extent. But when you just drive through the plantation, they are sitting on these electric, how do you call that? The lines between the electricity.
Yeah, electricity cables, yeah.
Because they're getting the elevation.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, what you say marries up to my very limited experience in Thailand, where I saw a couple of small holdings. One was very clean. It wasn't fully mature, but it was very clean, very little undergrowth, very little co-planting, very few native plants. And the other one was much more mature, loads of different native plants in and out, some beehives, some just lots of different stuff going on. And the amount of insects I got bitten by was significantly higher in the one with co-planted native species. So my very limited biodiversity trial, it kind of backs up those results.
and I guess that sometimes you might even think that's why people do it, because they know they're getting bitten all the time if there's a lot of undergrowth. But one of the things of the new buzz phrase that's coming is regenerative agriculture. What you're describing, particularly about the soil, about this cover, is very much about regenerative agriculture. Did you see anybody talking about regenerative agriculture in palm?
You hear more and more, like you say, Judith, people talking about regenerative agriculture, but it is indeed also a big concept. I think where it comes down to in the end is very basic practices of agroecology, just like keeping your soil healthy, seeing what benefits other plants can give, use of fertilized, organic, inorganic, bringing back the carbon and nutrients that you take out when you harvest the FFB. It's about 20% is oil, but the remaining 80% is biomass, carbon, nutrients, which is. It's not lost because they either burn it at the mill or the shells of the kernels, they even shipped out for export because they use it for fuel over there. So it has value, and sometimes also still a bit oil inside of it. And you see things like composting, it's getting explored and tried with. Biochar, also a term that I learned about like over the year now. So yes, but then what I think it's important to me is like get your basics right, and don't follow just one hype or like a mixture or a new juice that you can add on your soil and then poof, suddenly you get your microbial activity back again. No, it's soil takes time to become soil. It's not just put on organic and then you got soil. No, soil is so much more. Soil is alive, and it needs time to grow. And you need to protect it, especially from erosion. And then again, biodiversity plants come in because they keep the soil. So I'm not a dedicated agronomic. We need the agronomic experience and experts if you want to take this onwards. And but it all comes back to also, again, nature and agriculture. I mean, you need these ecological functions. Like I said in the beginning, we cannot just rely on only putting in fertilizer but taking all the carbon and nutrients out of your plantation.
No. I mean, we see with one of the challenges, I think, with regenerative agriculture is the breadth of the topic and the lack of agreed sort of standards or anything on it. And potentially, we've tried to define it, but as you say, one of the important thing is just to get those basics right and to understand those, rather than trying to really distill it down to some sort of measurable things that could be different across different areas and different types and different landscapes.
Yeah, maybe that's also it. I don't think we need one global definition of this type of practice, but just be open and honest what you are doing on your journey towards this type of. That's already a good step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. I think it seems as if there's a lot of interest in regenerative agriculture, and definitely most people are saying, well, what is the definition of it? But I think just what you're describing, looking after the soil, is the first stage. And also the comment about clean land and looking at it's clean. I can see that, somebody thinks it's tidy and that's better, but actually that is not great for nature or biodiversity at all. So definitely.
Balancing order and chaos.
Yeah, I think it sounds like it. Yeah, definitely sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's also, but it's not just about sharing information and knowledge, because these farmers that I met, let's say they have received a certification, extension services information. But then if you're afraid of snakes, you just want everything clean because you don't want the snake to be there. Or you see maybe a YouTube video who's promoting this or that, because it's always interesting not just ask what they do, but who gave you the information? It could be a company or an NGO or your neighbors or your friends, which is often the case, but also YouTube. They said, oh yes, of course, YouTube, because YouTube is all over the place. So, but then some persons also say there are lots of different messages out there. So but it's a tool we should that could be used by those in the extension services world to make use of YouTube. And then another one we talked about soil and organic matter. So you harvest the FFB, like the fresh fruit bunches, and then after it, in the middle, you get EFB, so the empty fruit bunches. When you're on the road in Indonesia or you see a lot of trucks full of FFB, like loaded and like full. But I only saw like after 3 days in the car, only saw 3 cars. I could count them. I started counting the FFB trucks, but I lost count after. Then I saw 3 trucks of empty fruit bunches on the road. So meaning that they will go, I assumed, back to the field. Because like I said, FFB is 20% oil, but 80% biomass, organic matter, nutrients that you could use to bring it back to the field. And I still last week I met a Wageningen professor, Maya Singeland, and she said, well, if you just only if you give away the entire FFB, but you only get paid for the oil, who's taking the benefit of these nutrients and carbon in there? So you could say small farmers are actually subsidizing the big mills and plantations for their for the nutrient and the carbon part, because they do apply it or they sell it on their own plantation. So just something to think about in the context of regenerative agriculture.
That's good. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, it is, because again, this whole idea of smallholders tend to use traders. It goes into the trader. They wouldn't be able to get anything back because the trucks that are coming around to pick up their fruit, or if they drop it off at the centre, they're not going to pick stuff back up. And yeah, it's just this idea of a return load, a vehicle bin empty. Why would you not take it back? Yeah,
the logistics could mean in theory, of course. Reality is always different, especially in places in Indonesia. But there's the truck is going back anyway, and it's going back empty. So actually did one collection point like trader. He did to ask him, what about EFB? Then he said, yes, if somebody wants it, I can deliver. But
so it's a lack of demand, not necessarily a lack of the mechanisms there. Obviously, yeah.
mechanism. Not it could be. I see potential and demand. Yes, well, demand awareness maybe because you see them struggling with fertilizer. If you ask them what's your biggest challenge, then access, availability, quality of fertilizers and agrochemical. It's a big. It's one of the top three. An actual replanting and quality of seedlings. It's the key. So
it's really interesting. I think bringing that back again to the point you made before about technology access. We always, again, it's a kind of European mindset. This idea that all these smallholders, they don't have access to digital tools or internet, and it's like I think is so outdated. Given the realities of access to these tools and we should be using them more. These people are using those tools, and
again. Well, I've been my former boss. He was a diplomat, so I've this very nuanced. Some will have tools and the YouTube and the phone, but I met people from Liberia last week. I mean, they can't go in the field when it's rainy season. It's just like I don't know how long it takes 3, 4, 5, 6 months. But just no connection, no roads, flooded, everything. Even in Indonesia, way to go around. Very interesting. So you put on Google Maps, you see, I need to go to this place, got the coordinates. Oh, nice, 9 hours. But then my driver, the first thing he asked me was, who's your contact? Can I just give me his phone number? And then I said, okay, he will call somewhere halfway. No, at the start, he picked up his phone and just checking out how's the road. Is there a shortcut? And then on the phone, he talked friends who live over there because he found out this route was flooded. And then there's a bridge over there, but there's also a little ferry that might be shorter. And then somebody came to pick him up from the ferry to take him through the maze of plantations to the actually the rubber plantation I was going to. So yes, technology again. The on paper and the reality is very different, but. Yeah, it's fascinating to see.
Well, there's no alternative for local knowledge, though. I guess, I don't imagine that the Google cars have managed to, that we've got lovely street view on everything, that the Google cars have managed to find a lot of those shortcuts.
No. But again, it's this whole thing about think more holistically about what's going on, about the different people, the who's getting what information. One question: you've obviously spent quite a bit of time in Indonesia. Did you think that people were or farmers were aware of the ISPO, the Indonesian standard, when you were there?
Depending if they work together with a company or NGO union type of organization, yes, they would be aware. Sometimes they get it, they got it. Sometimes it's still in process, so that means it's in process. But others they didn't know about it. But Indonesian regulation is very complex. Even I don't really get it, but you got lots of different local permits, licenses, registration bodies, abbreviations. So they might not have a ISPO, but they do have a letter from their village head. They might not have their STDB registration, but they have a land, so Surat Makilik, so land ownership document. So very mixed answers. And I think that's one of the, as I said, it's such a huge country. And after decentralization, also very decentralized. So very different responses.
And does that different responses go out to enforcement, kind of checking, auditing, having a look at, you can mention that, you can have as many standards as you want, but if they're not being enforced, followed, looked at, understood, then the value is negligible.
That also depends on whether the stakeholders, be it government, NGO or private, has been able to do the outreach and do the work in that area. Yes or no or not yet. So often in sustainability or smallholder support, we focus on the farmer or the plot of land directly. Mm-hmm. But there's also this governance, like good governance context around it with, well, first of all, coordination and alignment and communication between all the different public institutions. That also needs support and capacity, because if the forest commission office is 2 hours, 3 hours away. Well, that's so. Then, well, you ask about enforcement. Well, now a little. So creating that context of good governance is also something we should not forget. It's again the basic also. And then it starts with land legislation, but also planning, spatial planning. What do we want to do with this area? How much palm do we want? How much rubber do we want? And where and by whom? So those basic questions, that for me is what good governance is about.
Yeah, really interesting stuff.
So, in terms of, you mentioned the average age of sort of the smallholders that you were meeting out there being, 50s, 60s. One of the challenges was discussed at SPOD, and I've heard it at RT, was what's going to happen with the next generation. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, yeah. You ask a good question. A question also that pops up more and more. Mm-hmm. I was in Bengkulu, so that's province west in Sumatra, and I stayed with a villager friend of mine, Yanda. I met him. He does a very intercropping business. Maybe also maybe a good person for your next podcast. Anyway, I was in his village over the weekend, and so we drove around on the scooter, and then you see these young boys, like me, teenagers, 16, 17 years old, and they were doing sport, like me, running, and you don't really see that in Indonesia because now the climate and you don't have a road for that. But they were running like groups of 2-3 boys. So then at the end, he told me, you know what these boys are doing? They are practicing for the police exam, the physical test to go to the police academy. So basically what young people in that village wanted was get either a job at the government, be a government official, or join the police. Why? Job security. And then the ideal situation was get your job in the government and then buy some land and plant all palm. That's the dream, at least what I got. So you saw it. They were running, exercising to get the exam. And I heard stories that parenting, they save up money, they sell palm oil, they get into palm oil because they can then send their kids to university or to the police academy. And then, well, those that miss out or on that journey, they stay in the village or they become harvesters, which is, the pay is quite okay. I had some basic calculations that I always do. Don't have that ready here now, but it was above poverty levels. But it's hard work. It's quite dangerous because you, again, 25 kg, you get it on your shoulder, you're out, and there's no job security to no contract security or safety standards, health and safety issues. So, so that has a less social value. But then again, agriculture might come up more in this land ownership type. So that's a very interesting dynamic. I think we should pay attention to. So it's not just about the age of a farmer or what do you want to do? You want to be a farmer? Yes or no? There's a whole gray area in between.
That's super interesting. That's, there was a couple of sessions. There was one at RT. I don't know if there was one at SPOD. I think there was actually on, treating smallholders as entrepreneurs. Well, that's essentially what they are.
Yeah, but also realizing that their copy. It's only what we do. Is say in Europe, isn't it? About what people are trying to drive for, and it's a similar requirement, isn't it? That people want better living, better standard of living, and all of this kind of stuff, and looking for something that's going to make you money. And you're right to describe a smallholder as an entrepreneur is maybe that's what we should start calling them. Entrepreneur smallholders. But yeah.
Well, it immediately changes the dynamic and something, that Thijs was talking about earlier of that, the fact that he found one out of the 30 he spoke to, there was one who was actually working on his own farm. You wouldn't describe that. That's, again, it's a very different picture. And I think that reframe is something that certainly I needed because my perceptions are very different too.
I think it's this all round, certainly listening to you, Tyson, I think we could talk for a long, long time because we've had conversations outside of this, is, thinking more about holistically, and that not one sort of category of smallholders. It's very different. It could be very different in different countries, and definitely a takeaway, I think, for me is the flooding and climate change and weather patterns, where if roads get washed out, or I think Malaysia's suffered quite a few floods over the last few years. You've got to think about a bit that side a bit as well, and this kind of very black and white image that we have of, a plantation can be huge and it can be owned by a big grower versus the smallholders, and actually how all of this is interacting, and how social change is definitely making an impact. And that's a definite big takeaway for me.
And the technological change that's gonna do it. I mean, we could talk about so many things, and the technology in terms of things like automation in palm, because if everyone becomes a entrepreneur and just a landowner, and much of it's done automated, then we might see some big changes over the next 20 years anyway, which I'm sure we will. But potentially that's one for another day. I think that's probably a good place to call it. Thank you ever so much, Thijs, for your time and all your insights. Where can people go if they want to find out more about your work and you?
Well, thank you. And thanks for having me. I enjoyed being on your podcast and talking to you. Where can you find me? Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest. Send me a message over there. You can find some of my work. I think you will upload it. A link.
It'll be in the show notes. And if you send me over the other report, I will put that into.
Yeah. No, so LinkedIn would be best, and then happy to have a chat, or if people have comments or feedback. This is just we need to ask questions. I think that's more interesting than giving answers.
Definitely.
Great. And thank you to the audience for listening to the Sustainable Commodities Podcast. Join us next time. Cheers.
Thanks very much. Bye.